3 days later, Karen had transformed her dining room into a command center. Tax records, property surveys, and HOA documents covered every surface, while her laptop displayed satellite images of the neighborhood dating back to 2018. She'd barely slept, surviving on black coffee and the righteous fury that comes from being absolutely certain you're right. "I found it," she announced to her reflection in the window, then immediately called her only ally on the HOA board. "Margaret, you need to see this," Karen said when her neighbor answered. The Hendersons never actually owned the mineral rights to their backyard. Margaret Kellison, a retired librarian who'd moved to Willowbrook to escape drama, sighed audibly through the phone. "Karen, it's 6 in the morning. This is important. According to the 1987 subdivision plat, there's a drainage easement that runs directly under where their pool used to be. They may have damaged municipal infrastructure. Did you call?" The emergency HOA meeting convened in the Willowbrook Community Center on a humid Thursday evening. Karen had spent the entire day preparing her presentation, complete with PowerPoint slides and a comprehensive packet for each of the 12 residents who'd bothered to show up. "Thank you all for coming," Karen began, standing at the front of the room like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments. "Tonight, we address a serious breach of community standards that threatens the very foundation of our neighborhood's integrity." Tom Henderson sat in the back row with his daughter Sarah and teenage grandson Marcus. The boy was wearing noise-canceling headphones and seemed more interested in his tablet than the proceedings. "The unauthorized removal of a recreational facility," Karen continued, "represents a 12.3% decrease in comparable property values, according to my analysis of recent sales data in similar communities." Margaret shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She'd hoped Karen would take a more measured approach. Furthermore, Karen clicked to her next slide. "My investigation has revealed potential violations of municipal drainage easements that could expose our HOA to significant liability." Sarah Henderson raised her hand. "Mrs. Whitmore, did you actually contact the city about these supposed violations?" Karen hesitated. "I wanted to present my findings to the community first." "So you don't actually know if there are any violations?" Sarah pressed. "You're speculating." "I'm being thorough," Karen snapped, her carefully prepared composure beginning to crack. Unlike some people who make major property modifications without considering the impact on their neighbors. "The impact?" Tom stood up, his patience finally exhausted. "Karen, do you want to know about impact? My grandson has spent 3 summers terrified to go in our backyard because of that pool. But you're so concerned with your property values that you can't see past your own front door." "This isn't personal," Karen insisted, but her voice was rising. "This is about maintaining the standards that make Willowbrook Estates a desirable community." "For who?" The question came from Marcus, who had removed his headphones and was looking directly at Karen for the first time. "I've lived here for 2 years, and you've never once said hello to me. You just stare at our house and write things on your clipboard." The room fell silent. Karen felt heat rising in her cheeks. I'm protecting everyone's investments." "Whose investment?" Margaret asked gently. "Karen, half the people in this room have been here for over a decade. We're not planning to sell. This is our home." Karen looked around the room at faces she'd seen hundreds of times, but had never really bothered to know. Mrs. Chen, whose garden she'd criticized for being too exotic. The Patel family, whose cultural decorations she deemed inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetics. The young couple with twins, whose tricycles she complained about being left on the driveway. "I've dedicated 17 years to this community," Karen said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've served on every committee, attended every meeting, enforced every regulation. Doesn't that count for something?" "It does," Tom said, his anger softening into something that might have been pity. "But being a good neighbor isn't just about following rules, Karen. It's about caring about the people who live around you." Karen felt something crack inside her chest. All those years of maintaining standards, of fighting for property values, of being the neighborhood watchdog, and she'd never once considered that her neighbors might see her as the problem rather than the solution. The vote was swift and decisive. The HOA would take no action regarding the Henderson pool removal. Karen's motion was defeated 11-1, with only her own vote in favor. As the meeting disbanded, Karen found herself alone in the community center, surrounded by her unused presentation materials. Through the windows, she could see her neighbors walking home together, talking and laughing in the warm evening air. Margaret paused at the door. "Karen, do you need a ride home?" "No, thank you," Karen replied, still staring at her charts and graphs. "I think I'll walk." The night air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle and the distant sound of children playing. As Karen walked slowly through the streets she patrolled so vigilantly for nearly 2 decades, she noticed things she'd somehow missed before. The way the Chen family had created a small lending library in their front yard. The chalk art the Patel children had drawn on their sidewalk. The wind chimes that played gentle melodies from porches throughout the neighborhood. At her own house, Karen paused at her mailbox and looked back toward the Henderson property. The filled-in space where the pool used to be was already sprouting grass, blending seamlessly into the rest of their yard. For the first time, she tried to imagine what it might feel like to be a parent so worried about their child's safety that they'd rather face her wrath than risk another close call. Inside her house, Karen sat at her dining room table and began putting away her HOA documents. But as she closed the last folder, she noticed something she'd overlooked in all her research. A small notation in the original community covenants about fostering neighborly cooperation and mutual respect. She'd spent 17 years enforcing the rules, but had somehow missed the most important guideline of all. The next morning, Karen Henderson would find a small potted plant on her doorstep with a note that simply read, "Welcome to the neighborhood, Karen Joyu." But that evening, as she sat in her quiet house, Karen Whitmore found herself wondering if it might be too late to learn how to be the kind of neighbor she'd forgotten how to be. Outside her window, the excavator was gone, and Willowbrook Estates looked exactly as peaceful as it always had. Except now Karen wasn't sure if she belonged in the picture anymore. Karen Whitmore stood in her perfectly manicured front yard, clutching a stack of HOA violation notices so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The sound of heavy machinery roared from 3 houses down, where a massive excavator was methodically filling in what used to be the Henderson family's swimming pool. "This is absolutely unacceptable," she shrieked at Officer Martinez, who had arrived 10 minutes earlier after receiving multiple noise complaints. "They can't just destroy community property values like this." The officer adjusted his sunglasses, clearly trying to maintain his patience. "Ma'am, it's their property. They filed all the proper permits with the city." "But the HOA bylaws clearly state." Karen fumbled through her papers, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. "Section 14.32 requires approval for any major landscaping changes that could affect neighborhood aesthetics." Tom Henderson emerged from his backyard, wiping sweat from his forehead. At 62, he moved with the deliberate pace of someone who'd finally decided to stop caring what other people thought. "Karen, we sent the notice to the HOA board 3 months ago. Nobody responded." "That's because you sent it to the wrong address." Karen's voice cracked with indignation. "The proper procedure is to hand-deliver it to the Architectural Review Committee." "Which is you," Tom said flatly. "Living alone in that house, talking to yourself about property values." The excavator's engine shut off, creating a sudden, uncomfortable silence. Even the construction workers had stopped to watch the unfolding drama. Karen's face had progressed through several shades of red and was now approaching purple. "I am the elected representative of this community's standards," she declared, waving her papers like battle flags. "Do you have any idea what a filled-in pool does to comparable sales data?" Officer Martinez stepped between them. "Mrs. Whitmore, I understand your concerns, but—" "No, you don't understand." Karen spun toward him, her carefully styled blonde hair beginning to escape its hairspray prison. "I've lived in Willowbrook Estates for 17 years. I've watched this neighborhood go from a premier community to this." She gestured wildly at Tom's house, where his teenage grandson was now filming the entire encounter on his phone. "What exactly are you suggesting we do?" the officer asked. Karen's eyes gleamed with the fervor of someone who'd found her hill to die on. I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting tonight, and I'm invoking the community covenant violation procedures. She pulled out her phone and began dialing furiously. Mrs. Chen. Yes, it's Karen. We have a situation. Tom shook his head and started walking back toward his house. You do what you need to do, Karen. That pool was nothing but a liability anyway. A liability? Karen's voice rose to near hysteria. That pool was a selling point, a feature. But Tom had already disappeared through his back gate, leaving Karen standing in the street with the police officer and a growing crowd of neighbors who had emerged from their houses to witness the spectacle. Officer Martinez closed his notebook. Ma'am, unless there's an actual violation of city ordinances, this is a civil matter between you and your neighbors. As his patrol car drove away, Karen stood alone in the middle of the street, her HOA paperwork scattered around her feet by the afternoon breeze. The excavator roared back to life, and with each scoop of dirt that disappeared into the Hendersons' former pool, Karen felt something inside her harden into pure, crystalline resolve. This was war.